So let's look at the purchase order process and possible quality improvements. What's interesting about the purchase order process and purchase orders and receiving inspection is that they really are designed to prevent defects, but they don't always work very well. Because if you work in accounts payable or you work in an accounting function that has accounts payable and you also have a purchasing process, how many times have you experienced or heard how, we get this invoice in and, even though it has a purchase order and even though it goes through receiving inspection, there's still issues with the invoice. And I've heard this a lot of times. So, and purchasing can be very complicated. There's a lot of transactions involved. There's a lot of information to validate. So let's look at improvement approaches. So in the requisition step, requesting a purchase, it's important to create a standard format or standard formats with error proofing. I'm going to show you an example in a minute. The reason is it's not always clear when to use a purchase order, and it's not always clear what information purchasing needs, especially if it's a new supplier or a new item or a new service. In the purchasing step, possible error proofing improvements in terms, and a lot of this is related to systems. Can you do autofill of fields? Requires certain fields. Can you, in terms of autofill, can you also restrict fields, meaning that if a person from a certain department is purchasing an item or requesting a purchase of an item, that you want to prevent someone from inadvertently selecting a wrong price or a wrong quantity or maybe the wrong account to charge the purchase to. Simplifying the general ledger. That doesn't sound like a process improvement, but it can be very confusing for people who are unfamiliar with the chart of accounts to determine which account do I select for a particular purchase. And, in many cases, charts of account get bloated. There's like many different supply accounts, many different service accounts, and people aren't really sure which account do I charge this to. And this sort of gets into also budgeting, in the fact that, I want to charge this account, I want to charge this purchase to the right budget so I don't go over budget by charging it to the wrong one. In terms of preparing and sending purchase orders and also receiving items, blanket purchase orders are a method to improve in the fact that you enter the information once and then you use that purchase order over a period of time until certain obligations are completed, such as maybe certain quantities. So therefore, you reduce the risk of inadvertently entering incorrect information. Certifying suppliers. This is really about developing a relationship with certain suppliers. You don't do this with every supplier, but you agree basically on how the relationship is going to perform. What does a company want from their suppliers? Delivery, quality, lead time, and a price. What does a supplier want? Well, they basically want fair terms in terms of when it's going to get paid. So, the more that you can work out the details and certify the suppliers, the better things are going to be in terms of preventing defects on the purchasing side, and also it gives you an opportunity to possibly bypass receiving inspection or just accept what is on the purchase or the traveler that comes with the item and not have to really do much inspection. But again, you only want to do that with your certified suppliers. And this also helps on the payment side. In terms of receiving inspection, you may have to dig a little deeper to understand why certain transactions are not completed. I've seen in a few companies where like many people receive and then they pass the paperwork along to one person for entering. So obviously there's handoffs of the paperwork, there's waiting time in terms of when the item is received versus when the receiving transaction occurs, and there can be mistakes made in this whole process. And in terms of receiving the supplier invoices, improving quality, I talked about certified suppliers. And you may be able to pay off the purchase order. You may be able to voucher in accounts payable based on the receipt. Okay? And so there's different things you can do to maybe not require a supplier invoice. The other piece of quality is working with your suppliers. And I'm going to talk about this in a little while, but understanding the defects that are sort of created or caused by the supplier. Now, obviously, it's going to be difficult to really try to get a supplier to change, but you need to measure this and possibly work with your suppliers to understand why these defects continue to occur.